is Jim Perkins. I'm with the Quorum Group. We do mergers and acquisitions. We represent people, entrepreneurs that want to sell their companies. I am specializing in video game M&A at Quorum Group. I've been in the video game industry for about 22 years. I started out actually selling and publishing product on CompuServe as shareware product, and it was kind of funny because it resembles a lot of the models today where we were giving away the first episode for free and hoping people would buy the rest of the product. And that was a very, very successful way of great product rising to the top in terms of value and franchise. So some of the franchises and teams that came out of shareware and CompuServe online sales are id Software, who is now part of ZeniMax, and Bethesda, Epic. You may have heard of Epic. They do the Unreal Engine and are famous for many franchises in the video game side of the business. Duke Nukem, we published Wolfenstein, and a number of other products that came out of that went actually into retail. And it's funny to see all of that product retracting back and going online. So I have also been in your position as an entrepreneur who's looking possibly to sell their company in the future. I've sold 2 software video game companies in the past to large public companies, so I have some background in what you guys may be going through in the future. What we're doing here today is, also I should mention, if you leave your card at with Tim at the back of the room or with myself, we will get you our mergers and acquisitions report, which we publish yearly and update every 6 months. That has a section on it in gaming and what our predictions are and what the comparable valuations of your companies are in that report. So leave your business card with us. What we're doing today is we have a great panel of sellers here, guys that have sold their companies to larger companies. They are the definitive entrepreneurs who have built a company and sold it successfully, and we're here to hear about their experiences in doing that, the do's and don'ts of preparing and selling your company, what things to watch out for, what happened after the acquisition, how was the integration, and all those things that some of you have been here since 1 o'clock talking about a lot of the ins and outs of doing and selling your company. So you're going to hear firsthand from these guys what they went through. So we'll start with you guys introducing yourselves, a bit about who you sold to. You give us as much or as little information as you need to. We'll start with Vishal.
Hi, I'm Vishal. I'm the founder and CEO of India Games. India Games is a company which I founded pretty much out of school and it started operating about 10 to 12 years. And since then, we raised multiple rounds of funding and did 2 exits, actually, that was partial exits, in 2004 and 2007. One of them was a Chinese company, and the other one was a media company in India. And last year, we sold the company 100% to the Walt Disney Company. So now we are part of Disney, and I had one other disclosure that I'm actually not talking about anything to do with Disney and what Walt Disney is doing. I'm just going to be telling generic information about what I feel. So please don't attribute any of my comments to Disney.
Well, we have our ways. Thanks, Vishal. Woody?
I'm Woody Levin. I have nothing to do with Disney. My company was called Bring It. Bring It originally started off allowing people to play Xbox, PlayStation, and Wii games against other people for cash. So figure Madden, Halo, Call of Duty, everything that I did in college besides study, but playing for shots or beers or money, whatever it may be. Social gaming was exploding, obviously, 3-4 years ago, so we pivoted and created a embeddable casino arcade that was white label. So we worked with companies such as Playdom, CrowdStar, Rocky, or 50 Cubes, increasing the velocity of spend in their economies. We raised money, friends and family initially when I was in Chicago, moved to San Francisco, raised our institutional round led by Blumberg Capital, and we were acquired by IGT, who also bought Double Down, which I'm sure everybody's aware of, in February 22nd of this year.
Okay, Dan.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bernstein. I'm the founder and CEO, or I used to be the founder and the CEO of Sandlot Games, founded in 2002, sold it in 2011 to Digital Chocolate. Since then, I was in Digital Chocolate for 10, 11 months, and I'm starting something new again.
Thanks, Daniel. Tyler?
Hi, I'm Tyler Sigman, these days executive producer at Z2 Live Games Vancouver. And before that, I was with a company called Big Sandwich Games. We're a Vancouver-based kind of traditional market developer, mix of work for hire, original IP, console. We wrote out the whole DS, Wii waves and crashes, and PSN, kind of Steam is where we were before. And we were founded in 2006, completely bootstrapped. I came on as a consultant first and then ended up becoming a partner just because it was a good place to work. I really liked the guys, a lot of experience, just traditional developers. And we were acquired by Z2 Live this February to form their Vancouver arm, their first external studio.
Yep, thanks, Tyler. Matt?
Hi, my name is Matt Hewlett. I run Gamehouse here in Seattle, leading developer and publisher of casual games cross-platform. We're not necessarily a seller, we're more of a buyer these days. My background is about 20 years across media. I've bought 6 companies and I've sold 2, including Atom Shockwave, and a company about 10 months ago to ComScore called AdExpose, so as outside the games industry. And so my perspective will be both kind of games and then non-games in this business,
Excellent.
in this panel. Yep.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your speech this morning, too, your session this morning.
Thank you.
It's excellent. All right, I'm going to get into a little bit of detail on what you guys do, but more I want to understand the experience that you went through. We know who your acquirer was. Some of you raised money. Woody, you raised 1 or 2 rounds?
We did a friends and family round
Yeah.
of just around $1 million, and then an institutional round of 1.75.
Okay. And others?
We did a round, actually we did 2. We did a small Series A.
Yeah.
It's kind of insignificant, and then about a 1.5 million Series B.
Yeah. Tyler?
We were all bootstrapped. So some of the guys, a couple of the founders had founded Barking Dog that got acquired by Rockstar to become Rockstar Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just kind of a collection of that, you know, it's all been bootstrapped.
Okay.
So, I mean, we raised about $700,000 as a seed capital, and subsequently, over the period of 10 years, we raised about $6 million. That's for the company itself, even though there were a lot of secondary transactions which kept happening.
Okay.
So $6 million was the total amount we raised.
All right. What about games?
Last acquisition was up into a Series B. It was $10 million, Draper Fisher Jerviston, with Ignition as a follow-on.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how long did the process take to sell your company from start to finish? Woody?
Before I get to that, I'll talk about the raising money part. So,
Sure.
Being from Chicago, and I'd been an entrepreneur before, I got 56 no's from VCs. Literally, I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I would turn each cell white when we started, and then it'd go yellow if I wasn't getting emails back, and then it would literally be red. And there were 56 no's on that sheet. Every single one of them, though, got a handwritten thank you note saying, thank you so much for your time. It was great to see you, and I still have relationships with all these VCs. It only takes one, and we got a lead, and we were able to raise money and have a successful exit. But so that was a stressful process. For us, the sales process, we met IGT in August, and they came into my banker's office and said, what's the fastest you've ever done a transaction? And the banker said, 3 weeks. I said, okay, great, we're going to have this done by Thanksgiving. Everyone's going to go home happy. Fast forward to February is when the deal actually got done.
Yeah, the interesting, you learned a lot, and obviously you kept up with the guys that you were trying to raise funds with, and very professional process, which is, I'm sure, going to help for decades to come with the context you've got. Yep. All right. Tyler, how long did that process take?
For us, it was probably, sometimes it's hard to measure depending on the ebb and flow of talks, and we actually did a bit of a trial period also. Once we knew there was significant interest, we did a little bit of work for hire just to make sure that there could be integration. But I almost figure we actually had an M&A that almost went through earlier the same year. So it feels like it was a year process, even though the actual one was probably about 4 or 5 months. But it's the same experience, like you don't know where all the time goes, but it goes, and it takes that long to get through. There's just so many parties involved in every single thing that gets negotiated or reviewed. So that can eat up a week just like that. I mean, just to change one tiny little thing.
Did you find it took a lot of the management team's time?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were a small company. We around 15 to 30 people, depending on what was going on. And myself and my partner, Glenn Barnes, basically do all the management and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, you might as well, there's nothing else you can do while it's going on. If you really want to prosecute it to success, and that's the part that there's a risk to your business, which I'm sure we can talk about, but it takes all your time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those lessons. If you drop everything, you do risk losing your business while you're selling it. And there's no buyer out there that likes to see dropping sales or lost customers as a result. So it's critical that you manage your time as well, as best as you can, using as many as professionals as you can to do audits, accounting, legal stuff, whatever it takes to do it, and minimize your risk of doing that. I don't know, Matt, what's your experience in that?
The last company we sold was about 6 months, but we had loaded in the team, to your point, with folks who were transactional. A lot of the folks that I replaced myself with were a CFO and a CEO that were extremely transactional. So we were as clean as you could get from, up-to-date audits, 409A stock evaluations, as clean as you could get, as many provisional patents filed as possible to get the business ready to sell. I mean, I was brought in to restart a company with a lot of money from Ignition, which I recapped. So for us, I loaded in the team ready to sell, which was a very specific strategic decision that we made. So it was a relatively clean process, about 6 months.
But you prepared. I mean, you really prepared
Yes.
to do it, and that's
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's
Yeah.
professional, extremely
Yeah.
professional. How many buyers were at the table when you did your deal, Vishal? Can you talk about that?
So interestingly, we were never trying to sell. And I think in each and every transaction, we were actually going to raise money for our next round and trying to scale the company further. That was the story. That's what really went with what we went to the market. And what we saw that was that, of course, we had a lot of interest from VCs and the traditional investors. But because of the unique position we had, this also made a lot of strategic investors and very, very interesting. And we almost had a choice of picking between, all kinds of evil, let's put it that way. Of course, finally we got all the angels with us. That's a different story. But I think that's really a very interesting part of at least my learning, that the more you don't want to sell, the more they want. And I think that's what happened, because a lot of companies just come with a mandate that here is a company who's done X $1 million in revenue and they want to sell. I think that becomes a little more of a story where you're on the defensive, where you're selling, while in our case, we said we're not selling, we want more money to take the company to the next level.
How many buyers were competing with?
On an average, for every round, we had 4.
Okay. So great lesson there is you've got to have a lot of buyers, a lot of investors at the table at the same time. Don't do it serially. Do it
And if you
simultaneously.
only go with the sell mandate, that takes the VCs out completely, right?
Right.
Because they won't be interested in buying a company 100%.
Right.
I think that's an
Smart.
important point, really quick, just to jump on, is just maybe from personal experience. I've never actually wanted to date someone that wanted to date me. So, you can smell it. I'm on the other side of it, and there's something kind of weird when someone's really, really aggressive trying to push their business on you. It's almost better to non-sell. Great companies are bought, not sold. I think it was a great point that was just made. The perception of scarcity.
Yeah. There's no question about that. But the more, if you have many players at the table and you are thinking of something, definitely want to put that air on.
Absolutely.
That you're not really, but you have multiple buyers at the table and you're going, and the buyers know that.
That's right.
That's key. It's really important. In my example, my price of my company went up 300% as a result of bringing 4 other buyers to the table. And I was told by the first buyer that came to the table not to talk to any other buyers. And if I did, he wasn't going to buy my company. Well, he ended up buying my company for 3 times what he initially offered. And I played pretty cool. And I waited until the E3 that we knew we were going to have a hit product. So I was just playing coy. And I knew this product was coming out. We had 570,000 pre-orders at $50 a piece. Best time to sell is when you're on the upside.
Yeah, it gives you more, leverage is, of course, a big thing, and that doesn't necessarily mean aggressive or in a bad way. But in the M&A that failed earlier in the year, which I'm really grateful it did in retrospect, but, we did a no-shop in that situation, which, sometimes you have to do, sometimes you don't. The more leverage you have, the less you have to do that. But that means you're actually not able to market your company while you're under that term sheet. And the term sheet was good, so we were happy with that. Now, when that M&A fell through a few months later, for a small company, that's pretty rough. So on the second round, we just wouldn't even entertain it in that situation. I think the more suitors you have, then the more leverage you have to say, hey, that term, I understand why you're asking for it, but there's no way we're gonna do that. I mean, we're in the process of running our business and maybe trying to get the most value for it. But if you're desperate, or if you only have one suitor at the door, then it can be hard to actually have leverage to push that.
Definitely. And we leverage that non-shop. If you've got 7 buyers at the table, the other 6 see that no shop for 20 days and they go, uh-oh, this guy's serious. And you come off the non-shop, and then the price starts going up again. So it can be used as a leverage point, that non-shop, but it's got to be limited to a number of days that you're comfortable with. And at that time, they may think, and I did this with one of my companies, that they were doing all the due diligence on me. You need to have a team or a professional team, your team, doing due diligence on them. Because if you're selling your company for $40 million and they only have $5 million in the bank, you got a problem, especially if he's the only buyer at the table. Okay, Dan, what sort of experience can you relate?
Well, let's do a reality check, okay? So most game companies will not get sold for $40 million. Most game companies are on an upswing, and you're going to get several offers, and you're going to choose the best offer that you're going to get if you're lucky. And most game companies think that they're going to do much better than that, and so they walk away from those several offers, and you never hear from them again because they go out of business. That's the reality that we live in.
That's true.
That's the reality that we live in. So, we actually, we're in business long enough to see those cycles ebb and flow several times. And for us, the whole process, because we have gone through it, we knew what to expect, only took a couple of months. Plus, I had I knew Trip for a while, and we had a great working relationship. It was kind of a no-brainer. It was a deal that worked for both parties. So let's we can talk about having 7 or 8 buyers at the table, but the reality is there's probably going to be 1 or 2, and we're going to be talking about it like there is 7 or 8 buyers at the table. All that is just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep multiply by 3 whatever you've got at the table.
Well,
it's important, but it's
yeah,
important to have
but-
more than one.
But the reality
When it comes
is,
down
this,
to two.
there's a lot easier ways to make money than to run a video games company. All of us do it because we love to do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot better ways to make money. At the end of the day, we wish, we do this so, at one point we build something that we can actually have a good outcome. But let's not, one of the things that happens, I think, is a lot of companies that are successful, like ours and others like that, lose perspective, believe that because they built a hit, they can do another one, and they can do another one after that, they can do another one after that, and the good is just going to keep on coming, and it never does.
Right. That's good advice, Daniel. Very good advice. You've got to be realistic about your valuation. There's no question about it. You should go through, with a professional, what you think that company's worth. Realistically, what you think your company's worth. And get a range in there that's realistic. Because some of the things that really do go wrong, that destroy a deal, is that if you don't have a good idea of reality, ego will set in, greed will set in, all sorts of other bad things that will immediately throw up a red flag for a buyer will set in, and nothing will happen. So I think it's important to set that realistic value, at least in your head. The other thing is to make sure all your partners are on the same page. Because one guy may be thinking that 50, and we all know the company's worth 10, and keep that guy away from the buyers and make sure he gets on the right track, because he could blow up the deal. Oh, good advice. Woody?
Yeah, I
Any
mean,
buyers?
yeah, one of the things that I learned through the process, and one of my board members gave me this advice, is so like where's the value in your company? It can come from a lot of different places, especially in the game space. Is it revenue? Is it your user base? Is it your IP? Is it your technology? Is it your team? Hopefully it's all these things. So it was really, whoever is trying to acquire you is going to want to pay less and get more value. So they're constantly going to attack, right? Oh, well, your user base declined by 7% last month. Like, big deal. Does that really change the deal? Probably not. So one of the things that we during the process were armed with was, all these layers of value that we thought were going to, be beneficial to IGT when they acquired us. Another thing was, for, at least specifically for me, was really trying to figure out, so IGT, they hadn't even acquired Double Down at this point. They're a casino gaming company. What do they want with us? We're more of a platform that's providing, piping for this virtual currency arcade / casino. Where does that fit into their business? And it was, working with the bankers that we hired and saying, these are the scenarios. Here's how we think they're going to use us, and sort of, trying to understand what angle they were coming from so we could dovetail in there as well and really make sure that it was a good fit from their angle and what we wanted to go forward with as well.
I think that's a very interesting point. I just want to add two things to this. So about 2.5, 3 years back, we had an international business. We were doing stuff in the US and other markets. But we soon realized that the value really may not be for us to be in the top 50 developers on the iPhone. The value would have been if we could be the #1 developer in India. So we actually completely refocused all our activities to one geography and said that let's be #1 here rather than competing in a market which has too many players. And I just heard this stat a few days back that there are about 50 developers between the revenue of 10 million to 30 million on just the App Store. So the question is, even if you get to $20 million in revenue, there are 50 other companies there with this kind of scale. And you are kind of just, again, stuck in that whole loop of, getting value and getting your next IP. So that repositioning really helped us. And I think one of the reasons why we became extremely valuable is we were in a comparatively smaller market, but the #1 company there. So that really worked.
That's good. And that leads to my next question. What were they buying? What was the value that they were buying in the company? I think you answered that well, Vishal.
In our case, it was market leadership in a geography like India.
Yeah. Woody, what was it? Team, technology, revenue?
I think for us, it definitely wasn't revenue. I can say that with confidence. It was our technology, our knowledge of the space, the team, and just sort of a joint vision of what Bring It looked like inside of IGT.
Yeah, so that leverage of technology and the team there, they saw that.
It was really, for us, I think it was like build versus buy. That was really the case. They knew what it would cost for them to build it. They knew how long it would take. They didn't have any expertise in the social space. We got to work with 3 of the 5 largest social gaming companies, see their tricks, understand what was going on. So we had a lot of knowledge that came with the team also.
Yeah, timing has everything to do with it. When you're dealing with buyers like Google, and when you've got other buyers out there, and somebody's got to buy technology versus building it, they're definitely, and I'm just using a generic example, not Woody's example, but you've got to be concerned if you've developed the technology and a team that has mastered that technology, and it's a great leverage point for all these companies out there. You've got to think about the timing, because what if Google does it and offers it for free and it's over? And that's what's happening. They may buy a company, and you saw previous sessions, they made a record number of buys last year. They're just buying things to wipe out whole markets in spaces for technology. So if you've got specialized technology, think about the timing. It might be now. It doesn't necessarily equate to revenue, but it relates to that leverage that buyer has strategically in acquiring your company before anybody else does. I've got a deal right now where it's come down to 2 buyers, and they know that the other buyer who buys that company is going to own the marketplace. All the data related to it, all the technology related to it, so it's a do or die situation, sending the price of the company up. Any other comments on that?
Well, it's an art as well, right? Because it's like the Kenny Rogers song, know when to fold it, know when to hold it, know when to walk away, know when to run. And I remember really back in my first company, we actually said no, and we were like 25, 26 years old at the time. I'm much older than that now. No comments, please. We said no to a deal for $40 million with $5 million invested. And we put our cowboy boots on the table and said, we're worth more. Well, fast forward 6 more years, we got bought for $200 million with $100 million invested. So the cap table looked quite different in that environment.
I can imagine.
So it is important to understand what your put is on your business and how much you want to invest in going over the long road versus the short road. And I think people, and you kind of see it now, not that I'm the old man of the internet, I'm over 40, but you see it with some of the younger companies that they have a unrealistic expectation for valuations. And, as a buyer, I look at, teams that want to stay there for the long run, and they have either IP or tech. And I would always encourage people just to kind of know what their real value is based on market rates and know realistically where those market rates are going, because I see too much of the meteoric valuations being thrown out right now.
Yeah, they're
Which is
crazy.
good for the seller, obviously.
Yeah, it's great for sellers.
Right.
But you've got to be realistic. And we had a buyer's panel earlier today, just before this, and we had Kabam and EA and Big Fish games, and they were asked by a very savvy audience member, asked about the OMG Pop deal and what they thought if that was a good deal. Didn't qualify whether it was a good deal for Zynga or OMG Pop, but they all thumbs up for OMG Pop. And I think it speaks to Daniel's point, which they had a hit, they knew it, time to sell. Because recreating hits it's almost impossible. I've seen maybe 3 teams do it in my lifetime, and then they don't do it. And guys that I helped get started, they just can't recreate that. Did you have a comment on that, Tom?
Yeah, just had a comment on kind of what you can do on your end to, even if you're not necessarily positioning for your sale, you want to know whether you want an exit strategy, because a lot of people literally just want to have their company and do their thing forever, and that's absolutely valid too. I mean, we were always conscious that we wanted to exit at some point, but we were focused on building the business. But one thing we did is we tried to develop IP competency. We had our own technology, which 6 years ago made a lot of sense. The more and more that there's been rise of the commercial engines, that made less sense, but we stuck with that at times, even when maybe it didn't make the most sense that day, because it was part of we wanted to be attractive from a technology, IP, and team side. But at the end of the day, we got bought for one reason. That's mainly capacity and just, all the things that brings is time to market, experienced team. And technology and our IP creation didn't end up factoring into the deal. But all 3 of those things we were trying to tick off, hoping that, it's kind of like when you're searching for a hotel and you're saying, well, it's got to be in this location, have these amenities. So a buyer is going to be thinking, they're after something. They're after the tech, they're after the IP, or they're after the team. So we were trying to dabble in all 3. Not that I recommend the mixed strategy, but at the end of the day, it was capacity and team experience.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that we were talking about was investors in your company, and when if you've got investment people looking at your company, think about who those investors are, because that's a very critical decision. Not necessarily how much money, but who those investors are. If they're angel investors, if they're independent investors, great. If they're strategic investors, meaning they have a vested interest in buying 10% or 20% of your company, but really want to control it, be careful, because what is that going to do to your value when you want to sell the company? The only logical buyer may be that strategic investor, and nobody else will touch it. So think about it. On the other hand, you can structure a deal with an investor to make that not an issue. And so be very careful about that. Did any of your deals ever die, completely die, and then get resurrected?
Oh, sorry. I got the death part, but not the resurrection.
Too quick on the buzzer.
No, I mean, totally. I mean, the reality is the only ones that you hear about are the ones that are successful. So, I mean, yeah, a bunch of deals died, and, we've certainly learned a lot. One thing that I think is important to mention is that, really get your ducks in a row, especially if you're a content company or a technology company. You have to really own the IP and own the patents, and, making sure that you've done all the required work to make it easier for somebody to buy you. I mean, we're an international company, so we had an office in Seattle and Bothell, and an office in St. Petersburg, Russia. So, there was a lot of questions that got popped open. Oh, do you guys have all the IP rights? We'll figure it out. Do we have all that? And I remember a conversation that I was having with our GM in St. Petersburg in 2006, and we had very expensive lawyer working for a very long time and cleaning everything up. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Screw this. We've spent enough time on this thing. There's enough IP provisions. We're good to go. We're not going to have an issue. And I would say we were 99% there. But that 1% during the time that we were being bought was a major pain in my ass. And it was, you know, it extended the time period that they would have bought us by, you know, a good 2 to 3 weeks. And then after that, we had to do a whole bunch of cleanup to get that straightened out. So if you feel like you're going to sell, figure that stuff out ahead of time, because it's not going to get better.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned in doing this in my companies is if there's something there that's not, like there's a lot of great things about the value of your company and wanting to sell it, but if there's a couple of things that people should know about at the buyer level, the buyer's level, let them know up front.
Yeah.
It's really critical because they'll help you solve the problem if they want to buy you. They'll help you, and it's a great thing because then you've got an entire organization going to bat for you, whether it's an issue with a patent or an issue with potential lawsuit or partnership. Just work with them to do that.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying, that dovetails in well, and at least in my experience, you know, there was someone in particular at IGT who was sort of like a champion of the deal, and I don't know if you guys had this too, but someone usually will step up, and that's the person who's, you know, your real advocate. You know, and a couple, I mean, my deal definitely fell through at least 2 or 3 times, and you know, sort of a telltale sign is if you don't hear from that person for 2 days, like during the process, something's wrong. And I'm talking over like an 8-month period of time. This is like that best friend. I talk to him more than I talk to like my friends and family. I mean, but if you don't hear from them, like silence is a really, really, really bad sign in any transaction. But you know, having that advocate and having that joint vision of where it's going and someone who can take you across the finish line, I thought was really important.
I think an entrepreneur's best friend when you're trying to do any transaction is Microsoft Excel. And most of the problems start and end there. And a lot of times what happens is that, you know, companies love you and all of that, but you send them some Excel sheets and then they don't call you back. And after some time, you start realizing that most of these people are investment bankers and people who are more comfortable with numbers. And what you really need to do is master this Excel. Create 18 scenarios, bottoms up, top down, left to right, right to left, and have so many scenarios so that, you know, because that's what happens, you know, they go with the thing, and I think internally somebody shoots down a deal because of this scenario not working out. And I think a lot of ammo has to be given to whoever your champion is, and I think investment bankers definitely help there, but I think that's the first thing, go and learn Excel.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And also, I think you'd be careful of sending too much too early. I think that's, I used to work for IAC for about 5 years, and very, very much of a transactional company, obviously. And there was a style of kind of being the Borg, you know, understanding all the players in the space and slurping in all the knowledge and kind of crowdsourcing it within a larger conglomerate. It's kind of scary, right? So as a young company, be careful of the predatory
Of course, I mean, at
due
the right
diligence.
stages, you have
Yep.
to keep feeding the giant.
Yeah,
Exactly. You don't want to divulge too much. You want to make sure they're serious before you send them spreadsheets or your BI data or something like that.
Yeah, Matt, that's a great point. You need to stage that with the buyers. You know, in our experience, a good executive summary of 10 to 12 pages at the most, a financial memorandum that could be 5 or 6 pages long, something that's really well planned out so that you don't have multiple stories, you don't have multiple, you know, directions you're going into. It's a really focused thing, and just feed that information to them carefully, because, you know, the way we approach it is we're going to have 200 initial potential buyers to the table. We're going to weed out about 170 of those guys pretty quickly based on their ability to buy, their interest, their timing, strategic direction, geographic location, all of that. You don't want to hand everybody everything. You want to hand them something that'll get their interest. A letter of interest, 1-page letter describing your company. Executive summary will follow if there's a level of interest, a financial memorandum after that, and just feed them the right information at the right time and keep your story straight so that you do it. And you should plan to do that. Plan 6 weeks to do all that work to get those documents done so that everybody agrees with them. And that'll help you a lot because it'll stick to the story.
I had just a funny anecdote. Last summer, I was here at the same panel in the audience listening, and the previous M&A had just fallen through at the very end. And I heard somebody had a quote that said, "Nothing good happens between signing the term sheet and closing the deal." And that is absolutely true. So all that time, all those delays, the problem is once you sign the term sheet, okay, everybody's on board, you've got the terms. Now the only thing that can go wrong is something new, flashy, enters someone's eyes, whether that's on your side or their side, a chain of title problem with an IP, or just who knows, right? Or new management at the acquirer. I mean, you see how quick things go with companies. 6 months can change the whole strategy of a company. So that quote really stuck with me, and it was when the next opportunity came around, it was like let's get this thing seamed up as fast as possible, just because deals die for 100 different reasons out of your control, just completely ignoring all the things that under your control that you can F up yourself. So just closing that window, where nothing good happens between, I thought was good advice.
Yeah, no question. Thanks for being honest, Woody, about the deal dying a couple of times. I mean, what surprised you most about this whole process? Was it, could be the deal, but was it due diligence? Was it an army of lawyers? Was it change in man? What surprised you? What just...
Yeah, so I think for me, that not only did the deal die, it's all of a sudden, I see a press release that IGT just bought Double Down for $500 million. All right? So, I mean, we were bought for nothing close to $500 million. And, it being in the same space, I thought that, this was the end. I thought the next phone call I was going to get was from, IGT saying, it's been fun, but now we're pulling out. But, to their credit, the next deal I got was a very positive one, saying we're still moving forward, we're excited about you, your team, and your tech. So that was really reassuring. The most surprising thing, this is all like new, and I think from the banker side, with all due respect, bankers, you have 10, 20 deals that you do a year. For me, this is my life. I've given 3 years of my life to building a company. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. They want to, they're pushing for a higher negotiated price, and I'm scared to death that we're going to push them away. So understanding that balance and when to, look at your banker and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable going in that direction, because I know the relationship. That, and then just the sheer number of people. We were a company of 8 people, where there were 32 people working on the deal, including bankers, lawyers, and everybody else at IGT. So, I mean, just complete overkill, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a
So
interesting
all the deals that happened and then fell apart, with the bankers and the lawyers and everything else, that was kind of a function of kind of running a company for 9 years and 10 years, and every year we had a good 5 or 6 inbound interest, starting from about 2005 until we sold. All of that stuff, the actual end result was a positive outcome, but it was very, very simple. And maybe that's because the person that I sold it to knew what he was doing, there wasn't a lot of bullshit. It was actually pretty much a 10-minute conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you qualified the buyer perfectly.
Yeah,
He had the experience to do it. He'd done it before,
yeah,
both sides of the table.
yeah. So I think it depends who you also negotiate with.
Yeah.
And yeah, it goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, what's surprised you the most in your deals? What shockers? in your experience?
Greed.
Yeah.
I think greed, obviously saying simple things in panels is weird, but, greed, oftentimes with your partners is an issue that you don't expect. I won't get into personalities in a second, but I think that's the thing that always surprises me is when it's an event and it's been your life for a number of years,
Yeah.
the greed that comes out the last second is always shocking to me. I think so when you set up your company, I would strongly encourage everyone here to make sure that someone has 51%, at least on common stock. Make sure that the founder is really the founder and that there is a vote, because there are issues with greed as the numbers start rolling in.
No question. Anybody else?
And also, if you do have investors, outside of common stock, you have one of the things that I really tried to set up with my newest company that I didn't have in the beginning with Sandlot is, Sandlot started bootstrapped, and we did a whole bunch of rounds. I mean, not a bunch of rounds, 2 rounds, and then so we had, I think we had, I wouldn't say we had different visions, but we had different outcomes planned, or different levels of outcomes that were okay. At the end of the day, I think the investors that I had at Sandlot were awesome, the best that I could ask for. So it worked out pretty well. But the whole time I could see how it could go terribly, terribly wrong. So what I did at the outset is actually say, here's the company that we're forming, this is the money that we're going to have coming in, and this is the outcome that's acceptable. And be very clear from the beginning what's going to be okay for everybody. And if they're not okay with it, they shouldn't be in it.
Right.
And just
Good.
as simple as that. And
Good
then-
advice.
And then, you know, as things change, obviously, you change that whole, you know, equation, but they won't be so radically different that all of a sudden you get into a situation where greed becomes an issue because, well, you know what? You're getting 2x on your money. That's what you wanted in the beginning. That's what was okay for you. You know what?
Yeah, go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
the emotion is interesting because I liken it, I don't know if you trade stocks or whatever, and sometimes you go in with a plan like, okay, this is going to be my stop loss, or if I gain 20%, that's what I'm going to cash out, and I would think the valuation is, overvalued then. But it's always different the day you're looking at it. Like the stock's down 5% today, you're like, oh, I'm under my stop loss level, I should sell, but no, I got to hold on. And so we actually, after the first one, we kind of made up a chart of like that, like this is what we consider, yay, we're tap dancing, this is kind of acceptable, no real problems. This is like, we really got to think about it, and this is like absolutely not. And just having, treating it almost like an algorithm, taking the emotion out of it helped a little bit because, like the thing, if I ask you the day before you get an offer what you'd accept, is going to be vastly different than the day after you get the offer. It's just human nature. Like, well, if they're going to pay that much, obviously we're worth twice that, right? And it's really hard to narrow that in, and then you risk. You just got to know how much you're willing to walk away. It's like bluffing in a poker game or
Got to
whatever.
be disciplined, real discipline, there's no question. And you got to all agree on that discipline. And that's why ahead of time, if you're planning, like Daniel said, you've got the set of expectations there. It's going to save you all sorts of issues. We ran a conference in Los Angeles last week, and I had 4 guys attending that had deals that went bad, and it was every one of them was a misunderstanding between the shareholders or partners, the 2 key partners, guys that had lived together since kindergarten. They could not agree. One guy says, we're worth 3 times that, and it ended up in all sorts of problems, and they never got their money, and they ended up in court for
And it gets
2
more
years.
complicated with venture capitalists because
Oh.
there's 3-dimensional math
Yeah.
that they're doing, like, well, you're in this bucket of investments, or your IRR is this, and I've actually put you in that, and so there's posturing that you have kind of non-perfect information going into it. So just know and have a sense of where the venture capitalists invested in you at, what their IRR expectations are, so that you can have a logical conversation, because VCs hate it when entrepreneurs sell. They hate it. They always say they sold too quickly. And you don't know the magic math they have in the back room. And so just ask where that magic math is. Okay, this is the IRR outcome. This is where you're bucketing my investment. I think it's actually a good deal at this. Just have that conversation. Because what you get in a boardroom is someone's not going to want to go with you.
Yeah,
And
that's
there's some
great
weird,
advice.
hopefully you don't have any weird liquidation preferences or anything like that. But you got to be really clear and hopefully have ownership control over your investors. If you don't, now you're dancing very, very, very dangerously.
Oh, you've got to have ownership control over your investors. Don't lose control of that. And if they put some performance clauses in there that could make that happen, make your performance, it's got to be a done deal. Otherwise, they will take over your company and they will get the majority of the worth that you've built in that company. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to questions from the audience in a
I think
minute.
I just want to
Anything
add
to add? Yes.
one other thing which kind of surprised me, that every time we had a short list of people whom we think are really going to be excited, and every time they dropped out. So what we realized later is that you have to cast a very big net to really catch the fish. And in fact, we use for all our transaction investment bankers, and for our 3rd transaction, we use 2 investment bankers, not one to cover a particular geography and the other to cover the other geography. And the bigger the net, the better we got the results. I think we couldn't have done it with like just 5 people.
Yeah, that's proven. Yeah, you got to cast a wide net because you're going to find a couple that are really want to bite, and then you go through the process. But it's really good advice. It's important.
If I can also mention about the 50%, you can have somebody that owns 0.5% become a real pain in your ass. So, if you have 50% of your investors that are really great investors aren't going to be a problem to you, This stuff is not going to be a big issue. But, you know, if your concern is that I have a couple of investors and so I need to own 51% and make sure that I can shut out those other investors, the reality is that you've got a bigger problem. You know, you've got an investor that you're still going to, or a shareholder that you're still going to have a problem with once push comes to shove.
Yeah, very good advice, Daniel. All right, let's put it to the audience. Any questions? Sure, we got a microphone over here.
First off, thank you very much for all the great insight. Genuinely appreciate it. One thing that I'm involved in, what's it? Never launch two companies simultaneously. Hi, I'm that moron that does that. One of the companies, multiple shareholders, some small fry. I've got like 46% of that particular one. But anyway, to address some of the issues around a situation where we're being shopped around and somebody puts forward an offer, what we have is a provision whereby if somebody feels the price is too low, no problem, buy the other shareholders out. So I'm just wondering, that's great on paper. I'm wondering if anybody has insight into, in a reality world, where that actually does come to fruition, how that does or doesn't play, and do you get bogged down in the legal BS, or does that type of, I'll call it pseudo shotgun, in the real world actually work?
I've never seen it work.
Yeah,
That's a
I mean,
weird
just at
trigger.
first blush, like, where does that money come from?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, especially if you're at a startup, I mean, again, I don't know the financial situation, but, you know, I didn't have any partners, but in previous companies I did, if I said to my partners, buy me out at this valuation of X, I don't know where they're going to come up with the cash.
Well, the way it was structured, if I may, is just that we said, okay, you've got, if a genuine third party, arm's length, comes to the table, and let's just throw an arbitrary number, they say it's worth 10 million bucks. If somebody says, bull, we're worth 20, no problem, you've got 30 days to buy us out at the 10, and if you don't, then you forfeit your right, and we're selling it for the 10.
Okay.
And again, that's
Right,
on
so-
Deal
paper,
doesn't
I don't
go
know about
through.
reality.
What if the deal doesn't go through, though? Right? I mean, it's, in general, Jim's the expert, but, you know, every time you put weird triggers, whether it's employment or it's a ROFR or anything like that, and I've never heard of internal ROFR like that, Jim might have seen it, that it always looks sketchy for the buyer, right? So the buyer's looking at this, are these guys in, and there's some weird provision around price, and by the way, they know the price at that point, what if the deal doesn't go through, and then who's holding the bag? I think you start doing calculus on this, and it looks like less of a clean deal for
Yeah.
the buyer.
Matt hit it on the head. You know, I've had that provision in my companies, in a couple of the early companies I owned, and we never got to that point because it really looks bad from a buyer standpoint. They're wondering okay, these guys are not on the same page, let's walk away. Maybe it's good, lawyer might talk you into having that provision because it can avoid things, but I've never seen it work either.
Yeah,
And
isn't like draw along and drag along a more natural way to handle that? Like, basically, I mean, aside from just pure voting, some deals need like, you know, your shareholder agreement, you can do whatever you want, but drag along and draw along rights, you can like,
Yeah.
that prevents one person who owns, you know, 0.5% of the company from just saying, well, there's not much money in for me, I'm just going to obstruct the whole thing. You know, they get piggybacked along, basically.
Yeah, good. Good question.
If I can ask a second question, my primary business is on the app development side. We've got a couple of apps are out there, so we're a somewhat proven entity in a small dev capacity. We have a new
What's your
racing app
valuation?
coming. Yeah. How much you willing to pay? We have an app coming out in the fall that we're getting some good buzz around. The question is, and frankly, I have no interest in selling the company, but if somebody came with a bag of money around first app that we can use to fuel the other 10 apps that keep rattling around in my head, but we don't have the internal capacity to run with, is there a way to just parse off and say, okay, we're selling that app and we carry on, or investors generally, they're looking to buy, you know, the points you made before about there's the multiple triggers that people are looking for, the multiple elements. Is it feasible to sell off a property?
So my perspective has been, is that anyone that wants to buy a product also wants to buy the team that built the product. And also, one other piece of wisdom is when someone buys a car, you usually give them the keys, and they drive away with it, and it's no longer yours. So that's what happens when you get purchased. So at least that's been my experience. Maybe somebody's experience is different, but you know, usually, especially now, and that software is changing to software as a service, a team is just as critical as the IP.
Yeah, in that case, you're selling an asset versus the company, and the valuation of that
It's much
asset could
lower,
be
much lower.
considerably lower, and the implications of taxes and other things could kick in that. But every example I've seen, making it more complicated for the buyer, breaking off a piece of that is exactly what Daniel said. No, sell the company.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, good one.
Which, if any of you, stayed with your companies after they were bought, and whether or not you did, what happened after the purchase?
I just, well, it's funny because I stayed with the company and they stayed with the team, but, you know, Digital Chocolate found itself a little bit more in a different situation 11 months from the time that they bought us. And, you know, it is now a much smaller organization, and we're no longer part of it, which kind of splintered us off and allowed us to start something else. So, yeah, I'm no longer with the company, having gone through. But again, the point is, you sold the car, gave them the keys, they're driving, you know, they can do whatever they want. They want to crash it into the wall, they can crash it into the wall if they want.
You
I'm
don't
not
want to
saying
sit
that's
in
what
the
they
back
did.
seat
but,
the whole
you know.
time? You don't want to tell them.
I'm no longer in the car. They bought it
Yeah,
without me.
It's great. Yep.
Yeah.
It depends, I think, on the time frame too. You know, earlier on, you're expected to stay with the company and be a part of that integration. But Woody, why don't you?
Well, we were expected to stay with the company, of course,
Yeah.
until, yeah.
And I think so in, you know, specifically just in my deal, so our deal was a cash deal, but then there's also, you know, retention agreement, like there's that carrot at the end of the stick. You know, so it's like if you stay in the car or if you stay there, we're going to give you X or Y or whatever it may be. So I am there, but also, you know, going back to what I said before, it's having that joint vision of when you get there, what's going to happen. You know, and maybe I was naive and thought like, oh, it's going to happen that way, but it really has. And for my situation, it's, you know, being given resources and being able to operate as sort of an independent entity inside this massive 6,000 person company. So it's only been 5 months, right? I could be here maybe next year and say, okay, I got the wool pull over my eyes. But right now, you know, what they've said, they're doing. So I think it's you got to go into it knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, good advice.
In my case, they bought the car, they bought the fuel, and gave me the key again, and I'm still driving it. So I'm enjoying it.
Great as well. That's unique. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mentioned we got bought mainly for capacity and team. So, you know, without going into details, the structure of the whole thing is to further our ability. I love trying to stretch analogies like way too far until they break down. But if we were like the furniture maker, we didn't sell the beautiful table we just made. They're buying our ability to keep making more tables for other people. So, but we're only, you know, we're 5 months in.
Or more
also.
cars.
Yeah, or more cars. Yeah, why did I say the car thing?
And no for me in both cases, and and just from deal structure perspective, I'm not a big earn-out fan. I like it all up front, and if they're serious about the team, then retention bonuses are a great way to do it. Because I've been on the other side of creative calculus agreements where you come up with something very creative around OIBA or EBITDA, and the entrepreneur is constantly bitching and moaning that you're layering in costs into their P&L. It is a calculus that is horrible. So the cleaner you can make these deals and truly incent the team on the other side to stay with the company for non-allocated reasons is the better way to go.
Yeah, there's no question. Earnouts are very, very tough to measure. They're usually biased towards the buyer. And let's face it, the buyer's going to have a lot of control over what's happening with their company, and you're at their mercy. So earnouts really, really are tough to measure, and you're constantly at odds, frankly. So cash, number one, retention bonuses for your key team. There might be some incentives. But make sure the deal is easily measurable so that you don't have to worry about trying to measure that, because that's going to become a huge bone of contention week 2. Why are you spending so much money? Why aren't you buying that company? Why did you buy that company? Why are you developing that product? It's a big problem. So stay away from it as much as possible. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you very much for attending, and thanks to our panel. It's a great panel.